Welcome everyone to another episode of What's That Sound podcast. My name's Stu Watts. This is the second part of a two-part episode of the very first What's That Sound live event, which was held on the 21st of November at Marshall Street Studios. The first part of the podcast, if you haven't checked it out yet, was the panel. It featured Anna Laverty, Nicholas D. Lorenzo, and Becki Whitton. If you haven't checked it out, go check it out now. Before we jump into part two, I would love to remind you about the merchandise that we launched recently, the What's That Sound merchandise t-shirts. We've got white t-shirts and black t-shirts. I'll flash them across the screen here. Check them out. Aren't they amazing? If you would like to grab yourself one of these tees, jump into the merch store. The link is in the show notes. You can click on it now. Grab yourself a tee. They're only $35. If merchandise isn't your thing and you still want to support the podcast, you can do so by donating to the podcast. The link to the PayPal is also in the show notes. Even if it's something as small as the cost of a coffee or, something like that, every little bit helps to support the podcast, and it actually will all go towards putting on the next live event and keeping this podcast running. So I greatly appreciate it. If you can't do so, I understand. That's totally fair. Another way that you can support the podcast is by sharing the podcast on your socials and subscribing to the podcast on all of the platforms so you can stay up to date with everything that is What's That Sound. All right, let's jump into part two of the live podcast. So this is the second part, which was the crowd question and answer portion of the night. Some of the questions that were asked were around burnout, scheduling your time, as well as, managing your creative energy, providing a safe and inclusive space for women in the studio. So it was awesome to have some, real-time crowd engagement, and, some burning questions that, viewers of the podcast had at the time. So stay tuned. Let's get into it. This is part two of the What's That Sound live event, the very first What's That Sound live event. Let's go. You're listening to What's That Sound with your host, Stu Watts. Nice. Well, thank you for that part of the session. I'd love to open it up to anyone in the crowd. I'm sure you've all got questions. We'll spend the next 25 minutes or so. So shout out a question, put your hand up, I'll choose you out and I'll repeat the question as well.
How do you avoid burnout?
How do you avoid burnout?
And do you ever, or regularly, or...
I've probably burnt out twice that I can really recall. One was fairly early on when I was still working in London as an assistant, and I remember that day I'd been lifting. Okay, so the band I was always just so keen for everyone to think I was really great. And also I was really trying to prove myself because I was the only woman working in the whole of the UK in music production at the time. And so a band delivered all their gear, and the road crew, they were on tour, and they delivered all of their gear to the studio in massive road cases, but the road crew stacked it really high. And so I was there on my own and I had to set up the studio for the next day. And so I lifted down every road case on my own and set up the whole studio, all the instruments, all the microphones. And then I was getting the night bus home, and I was walking to the bus stop, and I thought I was having a heart attack, and I fell to the floor in absolute excruciating pain. And I rang the number that you don't ring when you're ringing an ambulance. You ring I don't think this is an emergency situation, right, but I can't breathe and I'm laying on the floor in East London. And they were like, how old are you? And I was like, I'm 21 years old. And they were like, I don't think you're having a heart attack. I had torn a muscle in my rib cage from lifting stuff that was just too heavy for me. And they said, you can't work for 6 weeks. And I was like, I have to work because I'm charging £6 an hour and I have to eat. And so that was the start of a really intense physical burnout for me, which I was flawed physically, so I just had to not work. So that sucked. And I've really tried not to do that again. And if something's too heavy, I just say, it's too heavy, someone else is going to have to help me. And that's just health and safety stuff. But I was just really trying to prove myself all the time. And the second time was probably right before COVID. And it wasn't until I was forced with everybody else to not work to realise I really needed to not work. And so COVID was actually a bit of a gift for me to stay at home with my baby and have a life. Yeah. So avoiding burnout, I don't know, but I've done it twice. Now I just try to I can see it coming now because it's happened twice. I actually know what it looks like. It looks like I'm feeling very guilty for not being around my family. I don't really want to go to work. I'm not really enjoying it very much. That's kind of burnout for me. And I just try to meditate, to occasionally go to therapy if I have the time and the money, and talk to my family and my friends. That's how I try to avoid it now.
It's huge. I think for me it comes in the form of stressing over finances, and when it's like you're going through a rough patch, like things like we were talking about before, and you start to question, are you good enough, this and that, and then your brain just starts going. And then I kind of go into this, I'm not going to do any work. I'm just going to, I don't know, my brain just kind of shuts down. And so I have to somehow figure it out by talking about it. I'm guessing that's how it works, talking about it to my wife or a friend or something like that. And then I had a recent opportunity they were offering small businesses 6 sessions to talk to not a therapist, but someone who's experienced in counselling. And so I did that, and they encouraged to make sure when you're scheduling things, and you have to factor in all the things that make you happy and make you able to do what you can do every day. So gym, sleep, all of these things, spending time with family, you have to make sure that those things are factored into every day so that you are then able to do those things. And usually the knock-on effect is that you're not having so much stress and things like that. So.
I also had this thing where the only thing I actually enjoyed was making music, and so I've had to force myself to find another hobby, and it's hilarious. It's gardening.
Gardening's the instant
because it's
dopamine.
It's outside of a room with no window.
And you can see your results as soon as you've done it. You're like, I did that.
It's the best.
Do your kids pull at the plants?
No, they're not bothered. I've got 5 acres, so they're just on the other side of the field.
Any other questions?
I want to know about your routine. So you said that you're up at 4:30. How long did that take you to figure that out?
I was sort of...
a while before that, or was there a certain point where it's like, no, I need to change?
When I was at uni, I was working weekends at the airport, and my shifts would start at 4:30 in the morning. And I just naturally carried that through to my studio life.
What time do you go to bed?
9:30ish, thereabouts, give or take. It depends. If I'm finishing late, I typically go to bed a bit later so I can spend time with everyone. But yeah, no, it serves me well.
You don't have to get up at 4:30.
No, you do not. You do not.
Just so you know.
Becki? Your routine? Oh, yours is a bit wayward, isn't it?
How did I get there? Am I included in it? I feel like I wasn't included in this question. My one where I wake up at 11:30 and have a gin martini. That's not actually real. I'm in like a total. My routine's been very scattered the last 2 years. I've lived in about 12 different places over the last 2 years. So I feel like TBD on how my routine is established. When it's established, I will let you know.
What about this then? Can I ask about scheduling? So you said before you were up in the AM doing emails and stuff until 7. How do you handle your periodic scheduling, to post on social media, do your invoices, collect your money, all that kind of stuff? Is it every week at a certain time? Is it every month? Something happens? Is there a calendar?
Yeah, so in the morning when I'm doing email and admin, I'm sending out invoices. My calendar, I have set slots of when I'm mastering or if I'm mixing, like I have slots on the calendar and then I just drag people's name into those slots. Often it's also involving like if material's coming in, I'll get it set up in Pro Tools on my laptop and it'll sync to the studio. So when I get there, I can just open it up.
You are so organised.
Because for my personality, I am I'm a scatterbrain. If I don't have that rigidity, I will forget.
I can relate
everything. I just forget. It's just my brain. So if by doing this and having things physically in front of me, it just keeps things going. As soon as I deviate away from it, I was so embarrassed. Yesterday I was at a show and I was meant to update a master for somebody, and they're at the show. I'm like, hey, did you get the update? And he's like, you didn't send it. I'm like, oh, okay. So it happens. Like if I don't follow the system, I'm just,
Yeah, I guess I have my own system too. It's just, it's very much my system, so I probably couldn't really explain it. But I don't forget things. I always remember everything I have to do. I just probably kill myself doing it all. So like I literally like worked all day in the studio yesterday and then got home and worked for 3 more hours on mix changes and then went and watered the garden at 10 o'clock at night and came in and, I don't know, did something else. Yeah, it's very random. But I have tried, well, since I run the guild, I've learnt about all these like amazing ways of running things, and it's probably more like you. So like I will schedule social media posts and stuff like that for the guild. For myself, it's totally random. It's just when I remember.
I got a question for Anna. When it comes to like musicians that just can't really play for shit, what's your approach?
Be very encouraging.
But do you have to then go on to having the hard words like we're going to need to get a session player in?
No, but I always listen to demos beforehand and I always go to a rehearsal room beforehand. So I would never be in that position. Yeah. That is why I do it, because I remember being on a session once, actually with the guy who gave me the very nice gift, and he had to fire someone who was in the band, and they were all like school friends, and it was fucking awful. And actually the band broke up very soon after that because it brought out all this awful, stuff. One person's like, oh, you're holding us back. And they're like, dude, I've known you since you were 6, so I would never be in that position.
I guess when it comes to something like that, like if they are like a bit looser live, like how do you decide whether you're going to track to a click or just keep it live and organic? Is that something you decide at like when you're at the
pre-production? Yeah. Pre-production, yeah, that's when I would decide that, yeah.
I would love to know on that then how you say no to people if you're not the right person once you've been to a rehearsal room or something like that.
I say, I'm not the right person for this project. Yeah. You guys are amazing, but I can recommend this person. I always do that. I've always recommended other people, and then the other people always get in touch and go, oh, thanks so much for that gig, because it suits them more. Yeah.
If you hit Anna up and she says that, it's code for you suck.
What did you say? It's what?
It's code for the band sucks.
No, it's not code for the band sucks. It's code for I'm just too busy at the moment. Sorry.
Dave?
I guess this question applies to you all. What are your thoughts now? I'm hearing more and more like labels creating AI artists and releasing the music. I know it's like you can assimilate to different artists, how they sound like the older artists and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on this whole process? Like what's happening? Yeah.
AI is a tool, in my opinion, can be used for whatever you want to use it for. Just don't steal people's music.
Or their likeness.
And don't claim that you've written it if you haven't.
And pay them if you do.
Pay them, yep.
That's basically the ask from the music industry is ask for permission or ask for consent to use it, pay us if you do, and have transparency about what you've used. That's what the music industry is asking for from these big tech companies. The problem is these big tech companies actually don't know what they have used because they've used all these third-party companies to do their scraping for them and they haven't had to provide the data. So we're in an absolute mess.
Wild West.
I think does anyone else have anything about AI?
No. was curious to hear what you had to say because I know you did the panel last time.
I've done a lot of panels about AI and music, and yeah, look, it's not great. We're not in a great place with it, but people are always going to want to listen to music from humans. So that's what it's not going to keep me up at night because I don't have time, to think about it.
Is it as big of a thing, like in the scope of all the music getting released, how big of a growing part of the industry is it actually?
I don't think it is that big, but at the moment. But the problem is the majority of people that consume music on adverts, on TV shows, all the people that write music and get big commissions for this stuff, those jobs are going to go first, right? So that stuff actually props up studios. It props up like a lot of the industry. And so if all that like bread and butter stuff goes, our ability to make art in those
get something
places
out of humans
is limited. And so we're just going to have to change the way we do things. We're going to have to start, DIYing things a little bit more, I think. And I don't think that so what I was going to say was the majority of people don't really give a shit about that kind of music, and their ear is not trained to go, oh, that was definitely played by, an amazing harpist. They are very happy with AI generated harp. They don't care. And so that's the problem. There will always be people like us that are obsessed with it and do care, but the majority do not. And so in 10 years, when the technology is amazing, there will be losses for sure. There's a question back here.
Yeah, Anton.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier about safe spaces for women in this industry. In an ideal world, what would a safe space for women in this industry look like?
Please don't sexually assault us.
Sure, yeah. I could go for that.
A guest that I had on the podcast, Emily Hopley, one of the points that she made that really stood out to me, it's like the little things that sometimes men do where they're overbearing and can, I'll take over, I'll do it from here.
Mansplaining. Mansplaining's a thing too.
Mansplaining.
Yeah.
And just being like, if you see a woman on the board and they're tweaking EQs, don't push them off and go, it needs to be it sounds so simple, but I think it happens. I don't know.
I think the ideal situation is that men in a studio setting are like approachable to ask for help, but don't push that on the people that they work alongside. And that the attitude that they bring is one of respect, just across the board, and receptiveness to critique, I suppose, in terms of like how they are behaving towards women. If a woman says, "Hey, I don't like it when you say blah," they aren't defensive, and they're just like, "All right, I won't say blah anymore."
Yeah, it's a lot of things. It's not just, I say, please don't sexually assault us to be shocking because it's very obvious not to do that, but it happens. It happens behind closed doors, and I know people who have left the industry because it's happened one too many times. And I always seem to get the phone call when that happens, so I know that it happens. And so that's a pretty obvious one, but there are other ones around just being, a good person, just doing the right thing, and and don't be afraid to ask what the right thing is either.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. Like, how would you like this setup to work? To give you. We're recording, aren't we? I won't say that.
Tea.
Defamation.
Right. So that. I think it is. I feel like it's important to go further than say like be a good person, because I do think that there's like this deep culture of like there's a certain socialization that a lot of dudes have grown up with, and like it's easy for people to think, yeah, I'm doing the right thing when it's actually harming a woman or making them feel uncomfortable in some way. So like, yeah, having that open conversation of like a woman being able to say, hey, I don't like this, and a guy being able to be like, oh, whoa, okay, all right.
Yeah,
I
that's
won't do
really
that
big,
anymore.
actually. That's really big. Accepting feedback. Yeah.
For me, it's really important that if I have a platform like this, I'm pushing women to the front, non-binary, whoever. Like,
Yep.
if you deserve to be here. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yep, I do. Cool.
any other, Timmy?
I've got one more question, a bit of a fun one. If you were approached to design your own plugin, what would it be and why? For everybody.
Come on, Nick. You have designed your own plugins, somewhat.
I've spoken with people, but I don't want to spill the beans. No, because literally it's something.
Watch this space.
Yeah, it's more of a watch this space. I'm speaking with a few people. If anything happens, maybe. Not bad luck. Yeah, no. It's
There's lots of things that I want to happen, but they might have already happened and I just don't have the upgrades yet. So, like, you know, when you import tracks into Pro Tools and they're from another session and you get all the numbers of the playlists, I really wish that didn't happen.
Fucking hate Pro Tools.
It's really annoying. And I just wish there was something that we could just put in there that would make all that go away.
I will spill the beans on things I have done.
Yeah,
so
go on.
people go like, what's a play? One thing. So I use Meta plugin to design and concept out things, and there's other developers use it a lot to just sort of brain dump their ideas into a thing. So what I'm going to tell you is already documented. It's already on YouTube. One was a mid-side plugin, but it had 4 parallel processing inserts where I could blend a particular amount of harmonic distortion, a particular amount of compression, a particular amount of filtered saturation in parallel on the side signal. And that was fun. That was really cool because, I don't know, I had an idea, I penned it out, and then I just put it there. So that's something that did come to
That
fruition.
sounds dope. That sounds like a really cool plugin.
Yeah.
The first thought that I had was a plugin where you could input like a work of art or a color or, you know, just like something you find on Google Images and have it create like some sort of MIDI for you, like probably not an entire piece, but like, you know, some sort of sound generated by image, which feels like that's the kind of thing that AI would
I feel
be
like
working
that's
towards,
yeah.
right?
definitely not far away.
It's surely not far away. But also, like, I kind of bringing this back together with the AI convo that we were having before, I feel like in my circles at least, I feel like there's a strong kind of shift away, or like an appreciation of the fact that AI aesthetics can be a bit naff. Like there's this sense of like, oh, you did AI album artwork, you know? And so something that's like, I like the idea of plugins that are using AI in sort of more limited ways. So it's like assisting the humanity of things rather than like, oh, here's your whole track because you put in a picture of a snail or whatever, you know?
Yeah, totally.
There's so many plugins out there that like most things exist in my brain and I just use stuff and I love using it. So that I can't think of anything at this point that I want because, I mean, I use so many different ones already. So it's like, I don't know. I'm sure they'll all be cooking up some new stuff that will go, of course we needed that.
Yeah, need.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Got 3 more minutes in this section. Joe.
For anyone on the panel, how far in advance makes you comfortable to be booked, to have bookings? What makes you comfortable?
Great
at night,
question.
to sleep at night? And if you don't have that in front of you, do you have levers to pull to try and help that?
It's a really good question. I think I'm usually booked up like 2 months in advance and have been for 20 years, and I just sleep because I trust that the phone will ring or I will get an email. I have to because otherwise I would just not be able to do this.
For me, my churn cycle's very quick, very fast, because what happens is people are wanting mastering in the next week, in the next 2 weeks and whatnot. My indicator isn't how far in advance I'm booked. Sometimes I can be booked 3-4 weeks in advance. Sometimes absolutely not. But my indicator is how many tracks I'm being sent for listening sessions in the morning. So the more producers and engineers sending me stuff to listen to, I can gauge, on average, on a Monday, I've probably got anywhere from 18 to 30 tracks to listen to on a Monday, and then it sort of weans down until it gets to the Friday where it might be 6 tracks on a Friday. I know if I jump into a Monday morning and I've got 6 tracks, a Monday morning and I've got 6 tracks to listen to, it's going to be a quiet next few weeks. So I sort of use that as my gauge. The lever, the only real lever is, I communicate a lot with my clients. I'll hit up engineers and producers and be like, hey, I know this album's going to be coming in a few months. I'd love to have a listen to the mixes. Do you mind pinging it through? And often it just helps you get in that talk a little bit. It starts driving that project a little bit. I can't speed it up, but it just gets on the cards a little bit more. So at least, come in a couple of weeks' time. Instead of it coming in 4 weeks, it might come in 3 weeks, which is very helpful, very helpful.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I feel like, so I do a lot of mastering as well, so that's kind of more like what my schedule is than what yours is, Anna. If I don't have a lot on in terms of like mastering or mixing, I'll make a record of my own. And in terms of kind of, interactions that are pacing things out or making sure that I have an idea of where my schedule's going, I have a management team for my engineering work. So they do a lot of that kind of discussion that you were talking about doing. To kind of like see where mixers are at and, see what the timeline's going to be.
Can I ask a question to both of you? Because something I've always, not always, but I reckon it was probably 3 years ago, I was thinking about management for my mastering career, and I was like, I've got a thing going. Is it like, what does it involve? Give me a breakdown of what your managers do, like as in tangibly X, Y, Z, because I'm curious. I really am.
I think the main thing that my managers have done for me is brought in a lot of major label work, because I mostly work with artists who are kind of DIY, doing their own thing or working with small teams, but my management team's affiliated with Sony, and so they started bringing in like a lot of pop projects, which is nice because I'm good at mixing pop and I like to be able to flex those chops. And and then they do a lot of invoicing and scheduling and help me out with contracts for production, which I don't have that legal eye really, so it's helpful to have people who can look over that. Yeah.
Was it expected before you jumped in with your relationship with management that they were going to be bringing in other projects, or was that just...
No, not for me.
No?
No, it happened kind of organically. Like my management came on deck at a moment in time where my schedule was just insane. Like I couldn't do, like I was needing to just not ever rest because I would finish my day's work at like 10 p.m. and then have to send invoices after that. And like it was just, and I don't have kids or anything. So that's just me sitting in a room doing jobs. And so like, it was really helpful when they came on board, but they, have aspirations for my career, I guess. So it was nice to chat with them about that and expand into the world that they're kind of operating in as well.
I'm just mindful of time, so that's fine. That was a great question. No, of course, no.
And management take 20%, just FYI.
Yeah. Let's thank the guests for that portion of the evening. Thank you so much.
Well, that's a wrap on the very first What's That Sound live event. Thanks again to Anna, Nick and Becki for jumping on the panel and sharing their honest insights into what it's like to build a career in the Australian music industry. If you like what I do here at What's That Sound, please make sure you're followed or subscribed on the podcast platforms as well as the socials. Help spread the word by doing something as simple as sharing the podcast on your stories. That really does help spread the word about the podcast. And thanks again for checking it out. And I will see you next time on the next episode of What's That Sound podcast. Thanks for listening to What's That Sound? Make sure you hit follow or subscribe on your podcast platform to stay up to date with each new episode. We'll catch you next time.